Okay then, so yeah, welcome to Rebtel. My name's Andy Kaminski, I'm the head of mobile here. As Alex said, I'm going to touch on some of the tech stack we have at Rebtel, and I'm going to do that with 10 Rebtel FAQs. Okay, let's start. So FAQ number 1, why is the logo upside down, right? That's a question we get asked a lot. It's kind of embarrassing, guys. Do you realize your logo's upside down? That sort of thing. Well, the reason is, as Magnus said, when he and many of the rest of us came into the company 2 years ago, we had to redefine and really think about what Rebtel was about. And what we decided was that Rebtel is here to turn the telco industry upside down, and that's what our logo represents. Our former CMO, a great guy called Frederick Rama, he said, if you have to make a decision, just think of what a big telco company would do and do the exact opposite of that. So we're turning it upside down. Okay, so we're here to turn the telco industry upside down, liberate international calling, hijack the phone lines. But what does that actually mean? It sounds like a bunch of marketing stuff, right? Okay, so as Magnus touched on, there's tons of solutions for calling, like tons of different ones. But they're not that great. They don't work in all contexts. Messaging is kind of solved, like WhatsApp has solved messaging, right? It's better than SMS, better than MMS, but calling is still a real mess. There's lots of different players and none of them are solving the whole thing. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so it's like Viber, right? Or any other VoIP app. Well, no, that's actually where we're different. This is a great misconception, especially because we're an app company, that Rebtel is a VoIP app. It's app-to-app VoIP calling, but that's not exactly what we're doing. We have a bunch of aspects to our calling platform, and the first one is local calls. So if I run through the journey within the app, you select a contact within the app, just like in your normal phone. Makes sense. The app would make an API request. This sends the number you're trying to call and your number and a bunch of other data to our backend, and you get returned back from this a local access number. Now, this number is like either owned by Rebtel or it's referenced to Rebtel from one of the providers. And then when it knows that when we call that number, when the app calls that number, it knows where to place the call. So yeah, we get back the local access number. We pass this with OpenURLTAL, this local access number, to the phone app, the native calling application. And like I said, this call it goes out. When it lands, it's routed through a SIP gateway to a asterisk cluster, and that's basically it's getting onto the telephone network, and then it's routed to the contact on the other side, probably the other side of the world in this case. Okay, so that's kind of local calls. So from the app, you're calling using real telephone lines. Sure, that it's within the app, sure there's API calls and things, but this isn't a data call. But what if my minutes are really expensive? In that case, you can make a data call, and it's the same. You select a contact, you make an API request, you get some data back with what to do with that contact. We use our sister company, I guess, a provider, which is Cinch. Maybe some of you know, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago maybe, Rebtel and Cinch were one company. They split into two. Cinch is now like the B2B side of that. So they're the calling platform. I don't know if that makes us the little sister or the big sister. But anyway, we have a relationship, and they provide data calling and other calling services for us. And then that's routed directly into their SIP interconnection, which goes to the asterisk and out into the telephone network and is routed to the contact. But the website says no internet needed. That's just marketing bullshit, right? Well, another aspect of calling, which is basically exactly the same flow, we call pdial. So you select a contact, but you don't make an API request, of course, because there's no internet. So we have like a reserved local access number that's stored in the app, which the app can dial via OpenURL, and it also passes on the phone number that you're attempting to call, which it then enters using DTMF, like so, and then this number, because it's an access number, it goes again into the telephone network and is routed to the contact you're trying to call. I don't know how many of you have looked in the app or tried in the app, but this is another common question we get. What's Rebel calling? Is that a typo? What the hell is going on here? Well, no, it's not. This is our brand name for app to app calling. So this is where we can offer free calling. And this can be a data call, of course, like standard VoIP, but also it can be a regular PSTN call, because what happens is select contact, API request, push notification to the other side, and then we create a conference on our back end. So this is when it's app-to-app calling, in the sense that both apps are calling into one conference. So if I am calling you receive a push request, you act on that push request, your phone dials in, we've created a conference, we both call in. Calling in is cheap because we're both calling a local number, and therefore we've created a conference with real telephone lines for free. Oh yeah, and of course that, because it's a conference, it works for groups as well. It doesn't have to be one-to-one because the technology is the same. Okay, this is like our newest favourite FAQ. What's that weird number in the pop-up that started to appear when I call? Okay, bear with me on this one. It'll make sense in a second. So with iOS 10.3, Apple have solved a security issue. Maybe you know this one. This is this pop-up here is Apple's solution to a calling security issue. So some teenager back in October or something, he created an app which called OpenURL Tell 911 in the US without any user interaction, which actually brought down the operational services of a telephone network for the police in one big US city or area. So Apple kind of got into some hot water with this. After 6 months, they released a statement. A week later, they released iOS 10.3, and here is the solution. So this is great, as you can expect, for our user journey, our user experience. This isn't Benedict Cumberbatch's number. This is the access number, because that's what you're actually calling. So this is the number, because I have a personal line to him, but of course he lives in Hollywood. But this is the number that I call when I want to reach Benedict. So this, of course, put a lot of users off. But that's Apple for you. You know how it goes. Okay, so let's get to a little bit more iOS specific FAQs. So they're maybe not very frequently asked questions, but maybe they're questions you would ask of an iOS developer here. How do you cope with complex navigation flows? We have quite a complex app. We have some complicated navigation flows. So how do we approach that? That's pretty simple, actually. We have Sarosh. No, we use the coordinator pattern to break things up and solve this problem. So I'm not going to talk about that at all, because Sarosh is going to do a killer job of that later on. How do you build complex views? Now, this one maybe is a little more interesting. Of course, there's a lot of ways of doing this, and there's a lot of potential problems that we have with presenting views. One of which is sort of how to present complicated kind of table views or collection views. Okay, just bear with me one moment, of course. I couldn't really do a presentation for you guys without showing at least some code, right? Okay, so I'm not going to look through the whole class, but this is a view controller that presents welcome offers, okay? And what we have here is a method that sets up a bunch of SAL models. So SAL models is our approach to this complex view presentation problem. Maybe it would be better to call it something different because the view model term comes with a bunch of baggage, but sal models is what we've gone for at the moment. Maybe like sal content or sal representation would be good. So let's go through this line by line. No, we're not going to do that. Let's skip to a slightly simpler version at least, and then we can look at it line by line perhaps. So the first thing we do is we set up our observables on our data items using reactive Cocoa. So this means that when we get fresh data from these APIs asynchronously, it's going to come into this method here. We extract the data from them, and then we create an array of sal models of different types. And the reason this is interesting is because if you look really closely here, we have, I mean, a bunch of these are spacing ones actually, but we have 9 different UI collection view sals here. So it's kind of a complex view, which would be hugely messy, of course, as I'm sure you would guess. So we create the sals, or the sal models rather, and then we set them to ourselves, and then we reload the collection view. So what this little bit of code here is doing is anytime the data is updated, it's going to import here, it's going to recreate the sal models array and reset them, and it's going to reload the table view. So we can cope with data being loaded and changed asynchronously here. So then when you fetch the sal, you just get the view model and then the sal, and then you set the sal with the model. So this really tidies up your collection view delegate and collection view data source code quite a lot. We can just have a really quick look at one of the sal models. You see how simple it is. Just has the initializer basically, and then the view sal as well. It's just setting the view properties from a nib. Okay, so this is one way of making a really complex layout kind of really really neat and really simple, and coping with asynchronous data. Yeah, and so this is actually what the view that particular view looked like. So each of these items is a different item is a different UI collection view sal essentially. Maybe we need to hide or show different ones of them depending on the data we're getting, depending on what the offer is, I guess. And this pattern that we've developed makes this really simple. Okay. But what about Swift? I mean, that's always the second question, or maybe the first question an iOS developer asks you now, right? Is are you doing Swift? What Swift do you do? Well, we don't have any shipped Swift code in the main production app. We've been very cautious with Swift because we have a complex application, and which is working really well with Objective-C. But we're keen to move into that world for various reasons, which I'm sure you're aware of. So we've recently rewritten the network layer completely as a framework in Swift. This can be dropped into the code base and also used for other applications like extensions and so on. This was a really neat way for us to try out writing a bunch of Swift, writing some important and valuable Swift in a way that's very isolated and separated from the code base without just learning Swift and cutting our teeth on Swift by mixing and matching it into the rest of the code base. Okay, and then the other question, this is maybe my final question, is that everyone asks when they come in here, is what the hell's the deal with the clock on the wall? Maybe you didn't notice because you're all facing this way. It's our CEO is actually a conspiracy buff, and it's the end of the world. No, that's not it at all. So this is our next major release date. When we moved here and we had this big project to like we rebuilt the app from scratch, we rebanded, we rebuilt everything from the ground up. So we got this for that release, and we liked it, so we kept it. So this is for the next big release. We release often, of course, but this is a major release. The reason why this is a really great one for the iOS team is because, as well as all of the stuff that we have from the product team and the commercial team and all of that going into this release. We have a bunch of stuff that we've developed in hack series and personal projects over the past few months. So this will include Siri, it will include Today extensions, it will include a watch app, and these are kind of made possible by this Swift framework because it's encapsulated in a framework as well. So that's, yeah, it's going to be a really fun release for the iOS team because everyone's put something kind of new and sexy from iOS into it. Okay, let's see if I can. The other thing that we've added in this release is the Lottie framework. So, not that one. So, does everybody? Have you guys heard of the Lottie framework? Yeah, it's this like Airbnb animation framework that means that you can generate your animations in After Effects with some limitations, but it's getting more and more fully featured. It's pretty cool. And then using this this kind of free plugin called Body Moving, it exports it as a JSON format. And then the Airbnb team have built a library in Swift. A library in iOS that can kind of read this JSON data and put it in a view of your choosing. You can apply it to different views. So it means you can get straight from your designer and really simple to implement, like really nicely and like really kind of clean animations that that work in all directions and will scale really nicely into any view that you put them in. So this is a really nice addition that we've also just added that we'll be shipping very soon. Okay. This is the first example, and this was actually shipped on Saturday. Yeah, that is true, Johan. Good shout. Okay. So I'm not sure whether as Magnus said, maybe many of you are. Yeah, sorry. Question. Lottie, Lottie. It's by Airbnb. Yeah, check it out, especially if you like working with After Effects. I have a designer that does it. It's really cool. Almost done. Okay, so as Magnus observed, maybe many of you are immigrants. Maybe you have a need to call, but maybe for some crazy reason you haven't actually tried the Rebtel app yet. So if I can encourage you to download the app, this is one thing we would do to encourage you to download it. If you download it within like the next 24 hours or you sign up at least, and then you go to our website and log in there, if you find the voucher section and enter the voucher Cocoa Heads, then you get $10 of calling credit to call anywhere in the world. So yeah, freebies. There's also stickers, guys. We know how much you guys love stickers. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Maybe we have some questions from the audience. I got a microphone right here, so if anybody wants to ask a question.
No.
Hey, so you said you're using coordinators, right, in your
Yes.
app? And you said your app is fairly complex. So
Some of the
what
flows
gotchas have you encountered while using that pattern?
Oh man!
Just warming up before Suresh as well.
Suresh is going no. Basically, I'm not going to give you any spoilers here. I can give you like an anecdotal example. Say, so we were asked by someone in product to put a button on a screen that would then kind of modally present a different navigation controller to a different part of the screen, which they assume would be a 5-minute task, right? You all know how this can be kind of complicated maybe if you have like hundreds of UI view controllers in your application or whatever. So after we introduced the coordinator pattern for this particular flow, then it was a 5-minute task. So it's a useful pattern for unpicking the complexity of kind of presenting things and pushing to the new view to the navigation controller and popping from it and so on. Huh? Yeah, of course there are issues. Yeah.
Hi.
I was wondering, why did you decide to refactor in Swift the network layer as opposed to other layers of your app? Was there any special reason behind the decision?
Well, because the API area is fairly stable, then it seemed like a good thing to turn into a framework, a great part of the application to remove from the app. And also, I think you need to create a library to share between extensions, which was valuable to do because then that code can be shared across like the Today extension or the Watch extension or anything else. So that it was kind of a combination of those things. But we kind of wanted to just safely extract something to start playing around with Swift.
No more questions?
There's one right at the back.
Okay, right at the back. You kind of have an obstacle course getting here.
Okay, so you said that you extracted like the network layer, but do you think that like having like a set of components that are repeating and extracting them into the library could help you for further use? Could that speed up the like compile time and things like that? Because usually extracting frameworks is most of the purpose is share code and faster build times. So would you go for further extractions is my question. And what would you extract after the networking layer?
Yeah, what would we extract next? I think, like, of course, the main part of our application is calling, and that's a very complex area that can be abstracted away. So I think we would love to, if we can work out a great way of doing it, extract like the calling logic to a separate framework. And that again could then be shared for a lot of other things. It would be great then for as a basis for kind of hack projects and mini projects. But yeah, I think it's a great approach if you have the resources to do it for sure.
All right, well done. Thank you, Andy. And